Harry and Mike might be the only two characters out of the main characters who aren't from Patience. So there's this kind of fish out of water context to Harry, and a fish out of water context, I think, a little bit to Mike as well. You know, it's a lot of fun to be able to allow Mike's insecurities to come to the surface. I think that in at least for me, my performance and choices in some of the things that he does, because he's an odd duck, Mike. And I think a lot of it is driven by some insecurity as he was starting to settle into the town. Our backstory includes that he and his father moved there roughly maybe 4 5 years ago. There were some issues in his past, some hurtful aspects of his time on the force in Washington D.C. That he was trying to make a fresh start and create an opportunity for his father to live in an environment, because he was facing some health issues, live in an environment that might be better suited for a retirement lifestyle for him. So they packed up everything and moved out to Colorado, and then the sheriff ended up passing, and he ran for sheriff. And I think that for him helped made him feel buoyed, and plays into that bravado that he has. That is that armor that protects him from his insecurities. But then all of a sudden, he has a deputy who knows everyone in the town, knows the town inside out, and has some exceptional investigative skills of her own, as long as he doesn't try to tamp them down. And I think that made him feel really insecure and like, oh, I have to prove myself to everyone. And I think that's what kind of creates that over the top component to him in some ways. But I think it's all coming from a place with him of insecurities in self. I mean, I think that's what a lot of people do. People who are oftentimes the most insecure tend to be the wrongest yet the strongest. You know what I mean? And I think that's a part of who he is, and he's come to redefine that. I think his relationship with Deputy Liv has expanded so much over the course of the 3 seasons that I think she's the only person that he feels like he can be vulnerable around. He's trying to learn and do that with his love interest Lena, but again, that's kind of Mike is in this conundrum of who he is versus who he feels like he has to be. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, yeah. And tell me, Corey, how did the opportunity come about for you in the beginning to get cast as Sergeant Mike? Was it the traditional talent process in terms of taped auditions, talent agents coming to you, say, oh, there's a part we might be suit you? Could you send to do a taped audition for a role? Or is there a particular backstory around this that makes it particularly unique and special, how the opportunity came about for you?
Yeah, I think well, what makes it unique, especially at this time, because I booked this series in the summer of 2018. That's how long, we've only done 3 seasons, but we've been working on the show for 6 years. We just had COVID pop up,
and strikes,
and strikes. Yeah, exactly. When I first read the script, I loved it. It was one of the best pilots I had ever read in my life. And when I went in for it, I had an instant idea of how I saw Mike. I saw him as this kind of amalgam of like Richard Pryor and John Wayne and like Bernie Mac and a little bit of one of my
That's a bit of
aunties in my
everything. That's a
family.
bit of
Yeah,
everything. Sorry.
and I went in and I was sitting there in the lobby. This was back in the time when you'd actually go into auditions.
Yeah.
I was sitting there in the lobby, and in this particular office, the way that it's set up, you can hear sometimes the people in the room auditioning. And I was listening to the other guys read, and they weren't doing anything like the way that I was doing it. And it also, it made me kind of feel a little like nervous. I was like, okay, have I misread this script? Am I like completely on like another, like, did I miss the boat with it? But and in the original script, Sheriff Mike was described as having these big burly muscles. You know what I mean? Which I don't know if you can tell, but I didn't wear my muscles today. And so when I got to the audition, there were a lot of like, you're in this industry
American
long enough.
footballer types,
Oh,
NFL
dude, these
quarterbacks.
guys, dude, and I think that's what they saw as their bankability for the character was maybe the physical side of it. But I knew that wasn't something that was going to work for me. So I just went in and I made it my own. We did a little improving in the room, which I love to do anyway. If you give me a microphone, you're going to have to turn it off to get me to stop. So it read really well. Connected with Chris in the room, Sheridan, our show creator, and our director at the time, David Dopkin, and who shot the pilot. And then I came back in for another read, and then after that, there was an offer. I had another offer for another show actually at the exact same time, and the other show was great as well. And I literally had a choice, and I chose Resident Alien because I thought to myself at the time, the other show, if that show, if that show doesn't go and Resident Alien, or if Resident Alien doesn't go and that show does go, I was like, okay, I can live with that because, I really felt passionate about Resident Alien. However, if I would have taken the other show and Resident Alien went and the other show didn't, I would have been kicking myself for forever, forever, forever. That would have haunted me forever. And I
Without giving any names away, did the other show turn out to be a success as well?
The other show actually did get picked up. They both got picked up, but the other show was canceled by the end of the first season.
Okay.
So and I hadn't had a choice like that in my career in a long time. I had a choice back when I did Hairspray on Broadway. I had also been cast in the first national tour of The Lion King, and so I had this choice between like the national tour of this show that had legs and everyone knew was going to be this big success, and Hairspray was this unknown show that no one had heard of, and I'll never forget the casting director telling me, he goes, when I turned down The Lion King, and he's like, man, I hope that show runs forever, man, because you are turning down a paycheck. And all I was thinking to myself was, I was in that hyena costume for like 20 minutes and I had to lay down for 30 minutes. So like doing that like 8 times a week, no way, man. And at the time when I got cast, I think I was second cast on the show. Sarah was cast first. Alan was actually cast last. And the show that I passed on actually had a star, attached, a name. But there was something about Resident Alien that was just different. The writing was different. I'm a huge fan of Family Guy. And I don't know if I just picked up on Chris's like energy through the page. But I tuned into that humor. It just clicked. I get it,
Yeah. And Corey, you mentioned about comedy and the comedic aspect of Resident Alien, but let's talk a bit about the sci-fi aspect as well, because there's a sci-fi sort of comedy. Are you big into these sort of sci-fi genre, the fantasy sort of worlds, the extraterrestrial, outer space, the Stargates, battles, the Star Galactica? Is that exciting for you?
Star Wars, all of that stuff. Yeah, I mean, being a part of this whole kind of comic sci-fi world is super exciting. I mean, the fans here are like, they're dedicated, bro. They are seriously hardcore dedicated. I went to Comic-Con San Diego last year. I don't know, I think it was last year or the year before, and we went to New York City Comic-Con a few years back. I just went to WonderCon out in Anaheim. It's great. And, I've always been kind of like a nerd like that. I play with action figures now with my 11-year-old son, Marvel, GI Joe, Transformers, all that stuff, man. I'm a nerd like that. I enjoy it. It keeps you a kid,
Yeah. And I suppose, Corey, in terms of prosthetics, in terms of makeup and wardrobe, how thankful in one way that you're not Alan Tudyk, that you don't have to sit in 2.5 hours on that chair while Harry's face is part of being putting on your body and sort of such. And when you see it in the flesh, when you see that mask, when you see all the artwork and creativity, does it still give a shiver, or do you think to yourself, wow, I'd love to try that head on sometime for myself?
I have zero interest in trying that head on. I one of the things, quite honestly, and Chris has been pushing. He wants to get Mike out of his uniform as much. That's why you've seen me in more civilian, or you'll see me in more civilian clothes in the upcoming season. Because I told him all the time, I love the fact that I know what I'm wearing every day. You know what I mean? Like I like wearing the uniform, frankly. It's polyester and it gets hot, but it makes it easy. On the closer, I was wearing a suit all the time, and see, when you're changing scenes, you might be changing a day, so that means you got to take off the suit, and that means like putting a new tie. It just was, of course. I mean, it's like champagne problems. Don't get me wrong, but I take solace and great joy in the fact that I know what I'm going to be in most of the time. Yeah, easy,
Yeah.
easy peasy. I have no interest in the prosthetics.
Yeah. And Corey, to be attached with a show now, you mentioned third season, and to be on a show that has sort of life in terms of that you're not wondering, say, episode to episode, whether there going to be renewal at the end of the season, whether a character is going to be died off or stuff like that. I know with acting and actors, never say never, as the big goes when you're dealing with a company, TV producing TV deals and TV networks. But is there some bit of relaxation when you get that go ahead where, right, we have another season in the bag to work on, and you know what you're going to be doing for 5 or 6 months of the year?
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, that's a golden ticket in this industry. Job security and having, if you can plan your life 2 years out, you're living a life of luxury in this industry. Especially nowadays with how quickly things are changing and the shrinking of the what is known as the traditional, television season. As a matter of fact, I saw a meme about a show for WKRP in Cincinnati. You know what I mean? And it said, it was just running down the stats of the show, and it was like, it did 107 or some episodes in 4 seasons. And I was like, holy fuck, that is, you know what I mean? Like, that's what television used to be.
Yeah.
22, 24 episodes, a
Back
season.
in the 70s with Starsky and Hutch and Dukes of Hazzard, it was up in 28 episodes a
You know
season,
what I
didn't it?
mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think about that grind, and I wouldn't really want that. I mean, on the closer, our longest season on there was 21 episodes, and that was like 10 months. And the thing about it is, a lot of people, when you're lucky in this town, when you're lucky, and if you're lucky to get a series regular spot and actually, start earning resources that can create a little bit of room to exhale in your life, it's always dangerous to get too comfortable. I think in this business, comfort is the enemy of progress. And you never know when that comfort's going to be yanked out from on you. I mean, we haven't gotten our season 4 pickup yet. I'm feeling very confident about it, but as anyone who works in this town will tell you, I mean, nothing in television is set until you get that pickup letter. That's the moment when, because at that moment they have to pay you whether they consider the show or not. Once the show is picked up. So I'm optimistic that we'll get a season 4. I think there's a lot of story left to tell, and I think that we would be doing our fans, honestly, a disservice if we were to leave them with where season 3 leaves off. I don't want to give any spoilers away because you guys haven't gotten season 3 yet, right?
No, we're on season 2 here, so we're behind in terms
Yeah,
of that.
yeah. Oh man, season 3 is a game changer in ways that I'm curious to see how we will. Like I told Chris, if we don't get picked up, you're gonna have to write the show anyway because I need to know how this plays out. You know what I mean? We left some pretty big cliffhangers. Really, this season, I've loved all of our seasons. Season 1 was great. Season 2 was great. Having 16 episodes was great. But these 8 episodes, they got shut down, shortened a little bit and tightened up for season 3, are so incredibly well done. We'll have to do a follow-up interview after you guys have had a chance to watch season 3, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. I mean, I think it might be our strongest season yet. And getting the Netflix, thing in place, I think also broadened the reach of the show. I think, for folks who hadn't discovered it on Syfy, they had, or on Peacock for that matter, they had an opportunity to sit and binge it. And I think we were in the top 10. We were their #1 scripted show for a while on Netflix, and in their top 10 in 20 countries for like, I don't know, a couple months, which is pretty impressive considering we only had in the first 2 seasons only have 26 episodes. So you don't have a lot to binge before it's over. So to be in the top 10 that long means that people were either rewatching it or telling more friends, and word of mouth, continues to propel this thing. I think word of mouth is the strongest. Your friend telling you, hey, man, you got to watch this show is very different than some influencer or reading some review. So I think, when people discover our show, I think they like the flavor.
And Corey, before we came on air, you mentioned another project that you're working on in terms of a sort of realism sort of story now, in terms of a campaign for struggle.
Yes, absolutely. I recently, well, not so recently, but I acquired the rights, the life rights for Jane Elliott. She's a diversity expert who created this exercise known as the brown-eyed, blue-eyed exercise, where she took a group of third graders back in 1968, the day after Dr. King was assassinated, and she had this idea about separating them based on their eye color. To give the kids an opportunity to see what it felt like to be discriminated, because her mindset was, if you want to see a decrease in the amount of racism in our society today, the first thing you have to do is allow white people to experience what it feels like for themselves. So you can take that connection away from just being sympathy and move it into the realm of empathy. And I think in the realm we're in right now, especially in the world we're in, it seems like we're in, how there was like the technological age, the industrial age, the information age. It feels like in many ways we're in the emotion age right now. And so the key to trying to create the change that I'm trying to facilitate here on this planet, I think, is driven by allowing people to feel something, not just read about it, not just hear about it, but to feel it themselves, because that feeling is something that will never go away. It's hard to push down your feelings about something that you've personally experienced yourself. And I think that the more we can create an environment where more people understand the truly kind of like impactful aspect of racism and bigotry and sexism as well. Until everybody can know what that feels like, we got work to do. I'll give you a really, really quick story if I can, if I can take up a quick time. I was walking my dog not too long ago, and I saw a dog that I usually see at the dog park. And the dogs recognized each other right away, right? And there was this girl who was there, and she was out with her dog, and we were like, "Oh, I see you at the dog park," yada yada yada. And I was talking about how I usually take them, to the dog park during the day, and then at night we might go for night walks. And she was like, "Well, I don't ever take my dog, on a night walk." And I was like, "Oh, is she like the headlights of cars, something bother her?" She was like, "No, I don't take her out for night walks because I don't want to be raped." And it kind of like boom, hit like a thud, just like it did in this exchange with us. And it made me realize, like, in that moment, that's not something I ever think about. I don't ever think about going out to walk my dog at night with my headphones on, listening to what I'm listening to, and worry about being sexually assaulted. What I worry about is taking my dog out and jamming the music, and someone think I'm trying to fucking do something and call the cops on me, and I get killed that way. But I guess my point is, there's all this talk about intersectionality sometimes, finding ways where even if you don't have the shared experience, you have the shared outcome of that experience. For her fear had to do with, men. For me, it had to do with racism. But we both had something.
That
You know what I
connected
mean?
you.
So
Yeah.
exactly. And in that moment, I was able to not just sympathize, but empathize with her via my own experience. And I think the more we have that, the more we can create an environment that is more